I was thirsty and decided to grab a glass of water from the kitchen. But as I got closer, the unmistakable smell of cake baking hit me. No one baked cakes without reason around here. Curious, I rounded the corner and froze. There it was, a freshly baked cake cooling on the rack. My eyes then fell on Doyle and Elise, both covered in flour, standing awkwardly in the middle of the kitchen. "Sir," Elise called softly, locking eyes with me. I glanced between the two of them, confusion thick in my voice. "What's going on here?" Elise swallowed and finally spoke. "Tomorrow's Ivy's birthday. We were planning a surprise for her." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Honestly, I had completely forgotten that tomorrow was Ivy's birthday. I stepped closer, seeing the nervous fear flicker across their faces. "Why didn't anyone tell me about this?" Doyle tried to speak up, but I raised my hand to stop her. I turned back to Elise, the frustration clear in my tone. "Why did you make preparations for my daughter's birthday without informing me? I thought... Elise stuttered. "Maybe you didn't think I'd be interested, that I wouldn't care." Both of them could have told me earlier. I could have gotten something special for Ivy. Both of you could have informed me sooner. I could have got something for my girl. I said, my eyes drifting to the cake again. I cleared my throat and looked at Doyle. "Doyle, leave us." She hesitated, then nodded silently and walked away, leaving Elise and me alone in the quiet kitchen. Elise looked up, eyes wide and earnest. "Sir, I can explain." I shook my head, trying to hold back the lump in my throat. "All right. Teach me how to frost a cake." She looked surprised at my request, blinking up at me like I'd just asked her to teach me how to fly. Then carefully she brought the cake closer and handed me the frosting spatula. I took it feeling awkward and unsure how hard could frosting a cake be. Before I could even think much about it, her hand reached out and gently took mine. She started guiding my movements slow and careful, like I was about to break the whole thing. But then out of the corner of my eye, I caught a stray lock of her hair falling forward, brushing against the cake. I pulled my hand back quickly, stepping away just in time to save the frosting from becoming a mess. "I'm so sorry," she blurted, cheeks coloring as she stepped back. "I didn't mean to hold you." I held up a hand, a small smile tugging at my lips despite everything. "Turn around." Her brows knit in hesitation for a moment, but she obeyed, turning her back to me. Without saying a word, I reached out carefully and began gathering her hair, pulling the strands up and twisting them into a neat knot at the back of her head. My fingers worked methodically, securing it so that no loose strands could fall and ruin the cake. My fingers fumbled slightly. How long had it been since I'd tied a woman's hair? I used to do this for Caroline back when life wasn't a wreck. The memory bit deeper than I expected, and I pushed it aside. "There," I said when the knot held. "That should keep the frosting safe." She turned around, brushing her hands on her apron. A blush crept up her cheeks, and though I noticed it, I said nothing. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't want to acknowledge what might not even be there. "Now," I said, motioning to the cake. "Back to the frosting." She nodded quickly, grateful for the shift back to neutral ground. I held the bag again, and this time when she placed her hand over mine, it was purely instructional. Her voice was focused, steady as she explained the pressure and the angle. We moved around the cake in silence. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, just practical. I listened, learned, followed her lead. When we finished, I stepped back and clapped my hands once like a child satisfied with a school project. "Well," I said, "that doesn't look half bad." She smiled just slightly. I lifted my palm toward her. "High five." She gave a soft laugh, then raised her hand and met mine in the middle. It was a light sound, a kind of laughter I hadn't heard in this house for a long time. Not from Caroline, not even from Ivy. "What's next?" I asked. "The decorations." She said, her voice more subdued again. I nodded. "All right. Lead the way." We gathered streamers, balloons, and ribbons from the storage closet down the hall. I didn't even know we had birthday supplies. Elise must have planned ahead. She moved with purpose, placing things with care. I followed, occasionally climbing up a stool to tape things above the curtain railings. She tried to carry too many balloon strings at once and stumbled slightly, one foot catching on the corner of the rug. I turned quickly and caught her by the waist before she could fall. Her hands landed flat against my chest. I steadied her. "Careful," I said. "These rugs are a menace." She didn't speak. For a beat too long, she stayed there, her eyes wide and startled. Then she pulled away, brushing imaginary dust off her apron. "Thanks," she said quickly, not looking at me. I gave a curt nod, pretending it didn't register. "You all right?" "Yes. All good." We went back to decorating. She handled the streamers while I started inflating the last few balloons. At some point, she hummed to herself, quietly, absent-mindedly, as she worked. It wasn't a tune I recognized, but it was soothing, familiar somehow. I checked my watch. Almost 2 a.m. "We should probably call it a night," I said. She nodded and moved to box up the leftover ribbons and unused candles. I grabbed the broom to clean up the bits of balloon shavings and frosting we'd tracked in from the kitchen. When we were done, the living room looked like a child's dream. Soft pastel ribbons, paper lanterns dangling above the windows, a table set for 3, maybe more if she invited others. I wasn't sure. "Ivy will love this," I said, looking around. She didn't reply at first. Then, "I hope so." The way she said it, it wasn't just about hope. There was longing in her voice, a yearning for something simple. I saw it in the way she stared at the decorated space, like she wished someone had done this for her once too. I looked away. "Well, good night, Elise," I said. "Good night, sir." She answered quieter than before. I left the room, careful not to glance back. The knock came just as the light of morning had barely crept into my room. A part of me groaned at the sound, not yet ready to face the day. But the other part, the part that had stayed up staring at the ceiling, thinking of Ivy and the cake and the frosting and the shy flush on Elise's cheeks, knew exactly who was outside that door. I dragged myself out of bed and opened the door. There she was, Elise, standing quietly with her hands folded in front of her. Her hair was pulled back into the same knot I'd tied the night before. "It's time," she said softly. "We're going to sing happy birthday for Ivy." She turned to leave, but I reached out, gently grabbing her wrist. "Elise, I don't know how to do this," I admitted, voice raw from sleep and something deeper. "I'm not sure I've ever done anything like this." She looked at me for a moment and then gave a small smile that didn't mock or pity, it just understood. "It's just something simple, sir," she said. "It's not about being perfect. It's just showing up." I let her go and nodded. I dressed in silence, something casual again for Ivy, not the stiff shirts or tailored suits that made me look like a stranger to her. I still didn't know if I deserved to be part of a moment like this, but today I'd try. When we reached Ivy's door, I was surprised to see both Doyle and Annabelle already standing there. Both were in their nightgowns, hair slightly messy, eyes still half-laced with sleep. Annabelle blinked at me. "Sir." I looked at Doyle, at the cake she held so carefully in both hands, and then back at Annabelle. "Let's go," I said simply. There was a moment of hesitation before we all moved in. The room was dim, the curtains still drawn. Ivy was curled up under her covers, her little bunny tucked beside her cheek. The sight of her made something catch in my chest, how small she looked, how distant, how fragile. And then we started singing. "Happy birthday to you." The words came out unevenly, not in perfect tune, but full of something more honest than harmony. I glanced down at the cake, then at Elise, then back at my daughter. She stirred. Her eyes blinked open and she looked around, still groggy. And then something changed. Her mouth pressed into a thin line, and the light that should have come from surprise and joy never came. "I don't like birthdays," she muttered, voice flat. The room went silent. My smile faltered. I took a step closer, trying to swallow the blow. I wanted to say something that would fix it, something that would make her see this wasn't a routine or a formality, that this time I meant it. But I had no words. Everyone looked at me, and then softly I knelt beside her bed. My hand reached for the stuffed bunny instead of her. I smoothed its ears. "I know, sweetheart," I said quietly, my voice a little rough. "You haven't had many birthdays to like." I felt Elise shift behind me. I didn't turn. "But can we try?" I asked gently. "Just for today. It doesn't have to be big. We just wanted to show you that you matter." Ivy didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the bunny, then flicked toward Elise, who stood behind me like a quiet anchor. There was no smile, no burst of joy. But she didn't push me away. And that was more than I'd hoped for. This time, I wasn't going to give up trying. Elise moved closer, her steps gentle, like she didn't want to startle Ivy. She sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking slightly beneath her weight, and pulled Ivy into her lap. Ivy didn't resist. She just leaned into her, that same bunny still clutched tight. "Daddy was the one who made your cake, you know." Elise said, her voice soft and warm, pointing at the small cake Doyle held in her hands. Ivy's eyes flickered toward it, then back to me. I gave her a small nod, rubbing the back of my neck. I can't bake," I admitted almost sheepishly. "But I decorated it, baby. Forgive Daddy for the frosting mess." There was a long pause, long enough to stretch something tight in my chest. Then Elise added quietly, "Ivy, Daddy also got you a lot of gifts." My eyes darted toward her. What Elise looked at me only briefly, that same calm, composed expression on her face. She was covering for me. I hadn't bought a damn thing. I'd spent the entire night focusing on frosting and decorations and trying to remember how to be a father. I didn't even remember the day, let alone the tradition of gifts. Ivy's eyes moved between us again. She hesitated, then finally she whispered, "Thank you." I blinked. She looked straight at me, her little voice steady. "Elise taught me to thank people who put in effort, even if it's not perfect." My throat tightened as the words sank into me. I nodded again, unable to trust myself to speak. Then slowly she reached forward and blew out the tiny candles on the cake. The moment felt small and massive all at once. She didn't smile, not really, but something had shifted. The barrier between us had thinned. And Elise had helped create that crack. I caught her eye, briefly nodded again, and then gently took her arm. "Come with me," I said under my breath. She followed, cautious, leaving Ivy to Doyle and Annabelle. As we stepped into the hallway, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The door closed behind us with a soft click. "I haven't gotten her a gift," I confessed, turning toward Elise. She blinked, then gave a tiny shake of her head. "It's fine. She doesn't expect anything." "I know," I said, my voice low. "But I want her to have something. Something real. Something she can keep. Elise looked at me and I could see the flicker of admiration in her eyes, hidden beneath the usual distance. Then she gave a small smile, just a twitch of her lips. "I can help with that," she said. I nodded. "Good. Because I have no idea what a 5-year-old likes. She laughed quiet, but it was real. And maybe for the first time in a long time, I did too. We were halfway down the stairs when I paused and looked over my shoulder. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I asked, lowering my voice. Elise glanced back at me with a quick smirk. "You're the one who dragged me out here, sir. If we get caught, I'll let you take the blame." "I'm your boss." "Exactly," she said, skipping the last 2 steps like a kid escaping school. "You can talk your way out of it." We slipped past Doyle and Annabelle, who were still cooing over Ivy upstairs, and ducked out the side door like we were sneaking out of boarding school. I hadn't done something this impulsive in years, and truthfully it felt strange. A little too easy. The cool air hit my face as we stepped into the driveway. Elise pulled the hoodie of her sweatshirt over her hair like she was preparing for a heist. "What exactly are we doing?" she asked as I unlocked the car. "Getting her something," I muttered. "Anything. I just need to show her she matters." "Right," she said, hopping into the passenger seat. "No pressure. Let's go save the emotional well-being of your child in one shopping trip." I gave her a dry look and she grinned. As I pulled out of the driveway, I noticed her trying to subtly change the radio station. Her fingers hovered like she didn't want to seem too eager. "You can pick something," I said. "Oh, really?" She turned the dial and the car filled with some upbeat indie pop. "What is that?" I frowned. "Music, sir. The kind that doesn't sound like a funeral march." I arched a brow at her. "You're on thin ice." She just laughed. We arrived at a small toy and bookstore tucked into a quiet corner of town. It wasn't flashy, which I preferred. Ivy never liked big places anyway. We wandered inside, and Elise was already drifting toward the stuffed animals while I stood at the front frozen. She turned and saw me still standing awkwardly by the door. "Sir, you okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I just don't know what kids like anymore." Elise blinked, then laughed again. "You have a kid, sir. She barely talks to me." "She's 5, Elise said. "You're her dad, not her TikTok buddy. Come on." She tugged my sleeve gently, and I let her lead me through rows of plush toys, art kits, and children's books. At one point, I picked up a talking unicorn that made loud, glittery sounds. "She might like this," I said. "She might also disown you," Elise said, taking it from me and placing it back on the shelf like it was contagious. Eventually, we settled on a sketch pad set a beautiful hardcover storybook with gold-lined pages and a small bunny in a pink dress that apparently matched Ivy's favorite stuffed animal. "She's going to love this," Elise said softly, examining the items in the basket like they were sacred offerings. I just nodded. As we walked toward the register, something caught her attention. A tall stand filled with princess tiaras glittering in ridiculous fake diamonds. She picked one up and placed it carefully on my head. "What the hell?" She burst into laughter. "Now you look like someone who knows how to celebrate a birthday." I snatched it off and looked at her. "I'm about 2 seconds from firing you. Worth it." She grinned. I almost cracked a smile, almost. After checking out, we stepped out into the sunlight, bags in hand. As I opened the car door for her, Elise turned to me. "You're doing good, you know." I paused. "What?" "Being a dad. You're trying." She shrugged. "Not everyone does." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded and got in the car. On the way back, we said nothing, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just quiet. thoughtful. She rested her head slightly against the window, and I kept my focus on the road. No music, no distractions, just us and the weight of trying to get it right. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she turned to me, her hand already on the door. "She's going to smile, trust me." I met her eyes. "Let's hope." By the time we returned home, the morning sun had crept higher, casting a soft gold over the front lawn. I killed the engine and stepped out of the car, holding the bags of gifts carefully in one hand. Elise moved beside me, brushing a stray piece of hair from her face as we walked up the steps. Just before we reached the door, she paused. "I invited a friend over today," she said casually, her voice light. I stopped. "A friend." She nodded, avoiding my eyes like she was half expecting me to say no. "Lara. She's like a sister to me." I thought maybe it would be nice if Ivy had more faces around ones that smiled for her. I didn't respond immediately. There was a flicker of discomfort, quick and quiet. The idea of strangers stepping into this house, into this life, made something tighten in my chest. It wasn't the fear of judgment, not exactly. It was exposure. I wasn't used to that anymore, people seeing too much. For years, this house had been a theater of silence, a place where broken glass stayed swept beneath carpets and conversations hung unfinished. I wasn't sure I wanted anyone else peering into that mess. But then I looked at her, and Elise, as much as she annoyed me at times, didn't make careless choices. "All right," I said, finally, my voice low. "If you trust her." She smiled, that same small, sincere one that she always gave when I surprised her by not being entirely difficult. "Thank you, sir." We parted at the top of the stairs, she moving toward Ivy's room and me back toward the study. My hand tightened on the doorknob before I turned away and pulled out my phone. There was one more thing I needed to do. I scrolled down until I saw Erica's name. For a second, I hesitated. I hadn't called her in months since things between Caroline and me had deteriorated beyond recovery. Erica had known too much, seen too much. Once she'd stopped by to drop off work files and had walked in on a silence so thick between me and Caroline that it might as well have been smoke. We never talked about it, but after that I kept her away from the house. I buried everything in the office, kept her in that box, neatly closed, detached. But now, I hit call. She picked up on the third ring. "Sebastian." "Hey," I said, clearing my throat. "Sorry for calling out of the blue." No, it's fine." I could hear the surprise in her voice, followed by the shuffle of papers. "Is everything okay?" "Yes. Actually, I wanted to ask you something." "Okay." "Ivy's birthday is today," I said. "And we're putting something small together. I was wondering if you'd bring the kids just for a bit." There was a long pause on the other end. "Ivy's birthday," she repeated quietly, as though the very concept shocked her. "You never mentioned—" "I forgot," I admitted. "Oh," a small exhale. "You want me to bring them over, if you're free?" I said. "They're around her age, right? Liam's 9, Anna just turned 7. That's perfect." Another pause. "You sure you want me to come by Sebastian?" It wasn't an unreasonable question. "For Ivy," I said simply. She didn't push further. "Okay, I'll bring them. Around noon." "That works." "All right. I'll see you soon." The line went dead. I let the phone drop to the desk, feeling the weight of old boundaries shift slightly, like hinges creaking open after too long. Maybe today wouldn't fix anything. Maybe Ivy would still feel distant, still keep her walls up. But we were trying, and for now that had to be enough. I had barely turned the knob when the door gave way with a soft creak, and Lara dressed in her usual oversized blazer, and Wide Grin stepped in, clutching a bright gift bag with cartoon ducks and polka dots printed all over it. "Okay, wow," she whispered, eyes darting around the foyer like she'd just walked into a palace. "Are we sure I'm allowed to breathe in this house?" I chuckled, shutting the door behind her. "You'll survive. Just don't touch anything gold." She raised a brow, amused. "Noted." We made our way in her boots, tapping softly against the marble floor, and as we turned the hallway into the main lounge area, I couldn't help glancing toward the staircase, half expecting Sebastian to come walking down any second. I didn't know why I felt so on edge. Maybe it was because Lara's presence, her loudness, her very realness made everything I had tucked neatly away in my head feel so exposed. "You're being weird," Lara murmured beside me, nudging my side with her elbow. "You're doing that thing you do when you're overthinking. Are you nervous I'll embarrass you or something?" "No." I forced a smile. "Just trying to keep the peace. This house isn't exactly a party house." She paused at that. "Yeah, well, it should be. It's a little girl's birthday." I nodded. Ivy's laughter floated down the hall from upstairs, faint but airy. That sound always tugged something soft inside me. "She's upstairs," I said. "Still with Annabelle and Doyle. Come on, I'll take you to the kitchen. There's cake and a ton of frosting smudged into every countertop thanks to last night." Lara's eyes lit up. "Ah, yes, kitchen chaos. The universal language of love." She followed me through the corridor past the drawing room and into the warm, sunlit kitchen. The remnants of last night's surprise were still there, frosting bags piled beside cooling racks, a few balloons straying along the corners of the cabinets, and the cake, now pristine in its final form, waited patiently on the island counter. Lara leaned close to it and inhaled dramatically. "Did you really bake this?" "Doyle did most of the work," I admitted. "I just stirred things and tried not to burn anything." She grinned, then turned serious. "You did this for her Elle." My cheeks warmed. Someone had to. Lara looked at me for a long second. "You're doing more than someone had to, and I'm proud of you for that. Ivy's lucky to have you." I looked away. "You didn't tell him, did you?" "Tell who what?" She rolled her eyes. "Sebastian, that you're doing this because you care." I stiffened slightly. "It's not important. He wouldn't care." Lara frowned but didn't push. Instead, she walked over to the drawer where I had told her the paper plates were earlier and began sorting them out like she'd always belonged here. Maybe for a brief second I let myself imagine she did. "Let's make this a real birthday," she said. "One Ivy will never forget." I smiled softly. "That's the plan." By the time the doorbell rang for the third time, the quiet, controlled rhythm of the house had shifted into something far more animated. The air smelled of fresh pastries and the vanilla frosting from the cake, and the sun filtering through the tall windows made everything feel warmer, almost too warm. I smoothed my hands down my dress as another couple walked through the front door, their child bouncing between them, all dressed up and wide-eyed. "Good morning." Sebastian greeted them, his tone steady and composed, wearing that effortless, quiet charm he seemed to put on like a suit. "Glad you could come. This is Elise. She's family." I blinked slightly at the sudden title, but I offered a smile and a soft nod to the woman with a striking red scarf and the man carrying a boxed gift. "It's lovely to meet you." "Same here," the woman said, her tone light. "The house is beautiful, and you must be the one who planned this." Sebastian mentioned how grateful he was for the help. My cheeks warmed, and I could feel Sebastian's gaze linger for just a second before turning to greet the next guest. "Excuse me," he said with a glance at me. "Elise, could you go get Ivy?" It's time." "Of course," I said quickly, grateful for the escape. As I turned and headed up the stairs, the subtle thrum of excitement from the small crowd began to fade behind me. The higher I climbed, the quieter it became, just like always. This house had a strange way of holding two different worlds within its walls, one of polished social grace, and another hidden just out of reach where real things, messy things, lived. I knocked gently on Ivy's door. "Ivy," I called softly. There was no answer, but I opened the door anyway. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, her favorite bunny toy cradled tightly in her arms. Her tiny back was slightly hunched, her shoulders stiff, like she was trying not to let anything fall apart. When she finally turned to look at me, her lashes were damp. "Sweetheart." I crossed the room and knelt in front of her. "I don't want to go," she said quickly, like the words had been balled up inside her and just tumbled out all at once. "There are so many people. What if they don't like me? What if they think it's weird that we never celebrate my birthday?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and I gently reached out to brush her hair back from her face. "Hey, none of that is going to happen." Her eyes welled again, and she looked down at the bunny in her lap like it could somehow protect her. "They'll look at me," she whispered. I exhaled slowly and sat beside her, wrapping an arm gently around her back. "You're allowed to be scared, but I promise this isn't about them. This is about you. About you getting something special just for being you. No one is going to judge you. And if anyone even thinks about doing that," I leaned in, lowering my voice like I was sharing a secret, "I'll give them one of Annabelle's scary looks." That pulled a small, reluctant laugh from her. "There it is." I smiled. I missed that laugh. She sighed and leaned into my side a little. "Is Daddy downstairs?" I nodded. "He's waiting. And guess what?" She looked at me with wide, watery eyes. "He helped decorate the house." Her eyebrows rose, surprised. "I know," I added, my voice playful. "I didn't believe he would do it." Ivy blinked, and then her small mouth twitched into something close to a smile. "But if I go down, can I hold your hand?" I felt something twist quietly in my chest and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Always." Together we stood up slowly. I smoothed her little dress and adjusted the hairband nestled above her soft curls. She clutched her bunny in one hand and my fingers in the other. "Okay," she breathed as if preparing to face something enormous. "You're going to be amazing," I said. And as we walked toward the door, I hoped that today would be something she remembered for the right reasons. The scent of buttercream and warm vanilla lingered in the air as we stepped into the living room, now transformed into something almost magical. Balloons floated in soft pastel clusters tied to furniture streamers twisted above like ribbons of sky, and soft music played from a speaker in the corner. The children, half a dozen or so, gathered in an excited little circle around the table where the cake now sat proudly displayed in the center like the crown jewel of the celebration. As soon as we entered, Ivy's small hand squeezed tighter around mine. All eyes turned to her. She froze. I could feel her fingers tremble slightly. She was trying not to show it, but I knew her by now. I knelt beside her without hesitation. "Just one step at a time," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything. Just stand with me." She nodded slowly, barely. Sebastian walked over quietly and placed a hand on his daughter's back, gentle, not pressing. "She looks like you," one of the mothers whispered to Sebastian, who only offered a tight smile in return. "Ivy," he said softly, "are you ready to blow out your candles?" She nodded again. Doyle, still beaming, stepped forward and carefully set the cake down onto the table. 5 pink candles stood tall and straight in the frosting, flickering softly. Everyone began to sing soft at first, then stronger. "Happy birthday to you." Ivy looked overwhelmed again, but I gave her a reassuring smile. "Happy birthday, dear Ivy." Her eyes lifted toward her father, who smiled awkwardly but trying. "Happy birthday to you." When the singing ended, Ivy stepped forward and leaned just close enough to blow out the candles with a soft puff of breath. Applause broke out. "Good job, sweet girl," I whispered, brushing a hand along her back. She didn't respond, but her eyes lingered on the cake. A few guests gathered their children to take photos beside Ivy, and she obliged, timid and reserved, clutching her bunny to her chest like a shield. There were games set up on the far side of the living room pin, the tail on the bunny, a simple ring toss, and a tiny makeshift treasure hunt Doyle had arranged with small prizes. "Do you want to join?" I asked her. She shook her head without looking at me. "You sure you can just watch if you like?" Still, she shook her head. I didn't push. Instead, I stayed beside her, watching the other children laugh and chase each other in gentle bounds across the room. Ivy's eyes followed them. Her shoulders stayed tense. "Ivy!" I tried again after a while. "What if I played with you?" She glanced up at me, unsure. "You would—" "Of course. You'd do the treasure hunt. I'd even let you boss me around and make me look under every cushion." That pulled the faintest smile from her. After a moment, she finally stood. "Okay, but only if you play everything. You got it." The moment she joined the other kids, the room changed again. Her presence, timid though it was, sparked curiosity. One of the little girls came over and held her hand. Ivy didn't pull away. Lara had taken it upon herself to organize a few simple games for the kids, and now she stood across from me near the drink table, a paper crown crooked on her head, grinning like a proud aunt. "She's smiling," she whispered to me, nodding toward Ivy, who, though still quiet, was letting one of the other children pull her hand toward the corner where the others were stacking cups. "You did that." I smiled faintly, shaking my head. "We did." Lara leaned closer. "Don't downplay this. You fought for this day." I watched them circle the room in search of little hidden clues, the sound of their laughter slowly folding into the soft hum of conversation and clinking glasses among the adults. It wasn't grand or extravagant, but it felt real, like a little corner of happiness carved out just for Ivy. Sebastian stayed mostly to the side. I noticed his tension had faded somewhat. He even managed a laugh at something Erica's son said while devouring 2 cupcakes at once. By the time the games wrapped up, Ivy was slightly out of breath and had even accepted a small paper crown from one of the other kids. She came to sit beside me again, cheeks flushed and eyes brighter than before. And then Doyle stood at the center of the room and clapped her hands. "Time for presents." The kids squealed and circled around again. Erica stepped forward, first offering Ivy a gift bag wrapped in silver stars. "For the birthday girl," she said with a smile. Ivy hesitated, then took it. "Say thank you," I reminded gently. "Thank you," Ivy murmured, her voice just above a whisper. One by one, the gifts followed. A dollhouse, a storybook, a pink cardigan with bunny ears on the hood. She smiled softly but truly for each one. I crouched beside her, helping her unwrap and place them aside neatly. Sebastian stood behind us quietly, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a small camera. It was the first time I'd ever seen him attempt to record something like this. His face was unreadable still, but watchful, his eyes not leaving his daughter once. And then it happened. The door opened with a faint creak. It was almost unnoticed at first, the music and chatter hiding the sound, but I looked up, and everything in me froze. Caroline. Dressed in a beige trench coat over a satin blouse and trousers, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. Her eyes swept the room, quickly settling on Ivy, then Sebastian, then me. Ivy's fingers clenched around the hem of her dress. "Happy birthday, darling," Caroline said, stepping forward as if nothing at all had been broken. Sebastian moved fast, stepping in front of Ivy with a subtle but unmistakable motion. Not aggressive, just a barrier. Quiet. Protective. A hush fell over the room. Ivy said nothing. Her bunny clutched tightly against her chest again. Caroline's smile faltered slightly. "I came to see my daughter," she said like it was a perfectly reasonable thing. My heart thudded. I needed to act quickly. "Lara," I said quietly, pulling her aside before she could say something sharp. "Can you go wait for me upstairs?" "What?" She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Please, just for a few minutes." Her jaw clenched, but she nodded. "You'd better not let that woman get to Ivy." "I won't," I said firmly, and she squeezed my arm once before turning away and disappearing up the stairs. The air thickened. Ivy froze the ribbon in her hands, dropping. Sebastian stepped forward instinctively, but she didn't move toward him. Ivy turned to me, a tremble creeping back into her shoulders. I moved to block her, subtly, gently pulling her back. The party, the magic of it, paused in place. Sebastian's jaw clenched as he took a step between his daughter and his ex-wife. The music faded. The gifts were forgotten. And just like that, the lightness of the day was swept under the weight of the woman who'd always arrived just a little too late. The warmth of the party buzzed softly in the background, children's laughter mixing with the scent of frosting and the rustle of gift paper. For once, the house felt like something it hadn't in years, a home. I stood near the far corner of the living room, my eyes occasionally drifting to Ivy, who was perched beside Elise on the couch, clutching the stuffed bunny I'd gotten her just hours ago. She was still hesitant, shy, quiet, but I saw her smile. A real one. And it was all because Elise hadn't given up on trying. I had just turned to offer Erica a drink when the front door creaked open. Then everything shifted. Caroline stepped inside like she owned the walls, dressed impeccably in a beige trench coat, her heels clicking like punctuation against the tiled floor. Her eyes swept the room and landed on Ivy with the accuracy of a hawk. She smiled slow and rehearsed, like a scene she'd practiced a dozen times in the mirror. The air tightened. My chest clenched. "Ivy," she sang sweetly, her voice laced in sugar. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." Before I could move or speak, she was already gliding across the room, arms outstretched toward our daughter. Ivy's body froze, shrinking closer to Elise. Elise stood instinctively, her posture protective, shielding Ivy with her own. "Caroline," I said sharply, but it was Elise who moved first. "Please don't touch her," she said calmly, her hand anchoring Ivy to her side. Caroline's face faltered. For just a second, the saccharine mask slipped, and a flicker of irritation passed through her eyes. "I wasn't going to hurt her," she said, her voice thin. "I'm her mother." Elise didn't move. "She's not comfortable." Caroline's tone hardened. "Don't tell me what my daughter is or isn't. She's my child, not yours." "That's enough," I said, stepping forward. My voice was low but firm. "Back off, Caroline." She scoffed and straightened her posture, smoothing her clothes with slow precision. "Is this how you run things now, Sebastian? Letting the help decide who sees our daughter?" And just like that, the warmth of the celebration drained. Conversations halted. Every guest turned with practiced awkwardness, the kind that knew when family drama was about to unfold in full. Annabelle, who had been quietly managing the snacks, stepped forward. Her arms were folded, her face unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "The party is over." Gasps and quiet murmurs rose among the guests, but Annabelle didn't budge. She began directing people toward the door with quiet authority. "Please see yourselves out." "What?" Caroline barked, whipping around. "The party is over, I just got here." "You weren't invited," Annabelle said without looking at her. Children clutched their parents' hands as they filed out of the room, giving us all a wide berth. Erica threw me a look, concerned but knowing, and gently guided her kids out. It didn't take long for the living room to empty out, leaving only us, Caroline, me, Elise, Ivy Doyle, and Annabelle. Silence. Caroline broke it first, chuckling bitterly as she crossed her arms. "So this is what it's come to," she muttered. "You, your new pet nanny, and your personal maid squad raising my daughter like I'm some outsider." "You made yourself the outsider," I said. Her eyes snapped to me. "Excuse me. You come and go when it suits you. You talk about Ivy like she's a pawn, not a child. You don't even know what makes her happy." Caroline took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "And you do? You forgot her birthday, Sebastian. Your perfect little world is an illusion. You're still the man who stayed quiet when everything fell apart." "I'm trying," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm trying to fix what I broke. What we both broke." "Oh, please," she sneered. "You think this little birthday charade fixes years of neglect." Elise instinctively reached for Ivy, whispering something I couldn't hear, and gently led her away. My daughter's eyes darted to mine once before she vanished up the stairs. I exhaled, grateful. "Don't walk away from me when I'm talking," Caroline snapped at Elise, but I stepped between them. "That's enough." My voice boomed through the empty room. Caroline blinked, startled by the volume. I'd never shouted at her before, not once, not even during our worst moments. Her expression faltered, as if she'd finally realized the lines were no longer in her favor. She tried again, her tone dipping lower, silkier, more manipulative. "You really think she cares about you," she whispered. "You're just another broken man to her, Sebastian. You think she's loyal, but she's young, naive. She'll move on like they all do." Her words hit somewhere sharp, but not in the way she intended. Then her voice dipped colder. "Or maybe she already has. You sure she's not sleeping in your bed yet? Maybe that's why she's so protective of Ivy." And something in me snapped. My hand twitched, rising slightly, a sudden unfiltered reaction, but I caught myself. I froze. My fist clenched, shaking, but I didn't raise it. I forced it down slowly, deliberately, every muscle in my arm screaming with restraint. Caroline flinched anyway. She took a step back, stunned. "You disgust me," I said, my voice rough and hollow. "You're her mother. You should be protecting her, not using her as a chess piece." There was silence for a long beat. Then Caroline laughed, cold and hollow. "You're weak now," she said. "You let your guilt chain you." And then she turned and stormed out, her heels echoing against the marble until the door slammed shut. I stood there, the silence returning, with full force pressing against my chest. Annabelle stepped beside me, quiet for a long moment. "You did the right thing," she said softly, but it didn't feel like it. I turned to the stairs where Elise had taken Ivy, and without another word I followed. The house was silent again. The colorful chaos of the party had been swept into memory, leaving only crumbs on the floor and deflated balloons bobbing against the baseboards. And yet the tension still clung to the air like dust that refused to settle. Caroline's perfume lingered far longer than she had. I walked up the stairs behind Elise, each step heavier than the last. I could still hear Ivy's soft voice echoing in my head from earlier, quiet, confused, but hurting in a way that shook me. She hadn't cried during the confrontation. She hadn't screamed, but the look in her eyes when Caroline tried to touch her. I swallowed hard and knocked gently on her bedroom door. Elise opened it for me. Ivy sat on the edge of her bed, still in her birthday dress, her feet not quite reaching the carpet. The pink crown was gone. Her small bunny was clutched tightly in her arms, its ear twisted in her grip. She looked up the moment she heard my footsteps. Her face was unreadable. "Ivy." I crouched in front of her, gently resting my hand on the bed beside her. "I'm sorry for what happened downstairs." She didn't say anything. Elise stepped around and sat beside her, placing a hand lightly on her back. Ivy leaned into her without thinking. "I shouldn't have let her walk in like that," I continued. "And I'm sorry she made you feel like that." Ivy stared at her bunny for a long time. Then finally she spoke. "I hate her." Her voice was a whisper, but it cut through the room like a siren. My chest tightened. "Ivy," I said softly. "You don't have to say that." "But it's true," she snapped, her little voice breaking for the first time that day. Her knuckles whitened around the bunny's arm. "She always leaves. She always yells and lies and says mean things. She makes you sad and she looks at me like I'm not even real. I hate her." Elise blinked, clearly thrown by the rawness of it. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I couldn't tell her she was wrong because I knew she wasn't. But she was still just 5. "Ivy," I said again, slower this time. "I know she's hurt you, and you don't have to pretend things are okay, but hating someone, it hurts you too. I don't care." She turned away from me, burying her face into Elise's side. "I don't want her near me, ever again." Elise rubbed her hand up and down Ivy's back. "I know, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups do the wrong things. That doesn't mean Daddy." Her voice was small again, muffled in fabric. "Can I ask you something?" I met Elise's gaze briefly before answering. "Of course, baby. Anything." Ivy lifted her head. Her face was red, but there were no tears, just fierce, fragile resolve in her eyes. "Promise me she'll never come back, that she won't ever be allowed in this house again." The room stilled. I blinked. "Ivy, promise me, or I'll run away. I mean it, Daddy. I'll run away and hide and no one will find me." There was no drama in her voice, no tantrum, just a plain, trembling declaration from a little girl who had seen too much. I froze. Even Elise looked stunned. "Ivy," she said gently, "where did you learn to speak like that?" Ivy hugged her bunny tighter. "TV." I almost laughed, but the ache in my throat choked it down. I stood slowly, walking to the window and placing my hand against the cool glass. I didn't want to make promises I couldn't keep. But for once, maybe this was a promise I needed to make. I turned back to face her. "I promise you this," I said. "I won't let anyone hurt you again. Not even her." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. A quiet nod that said she believed me. Elise leaned down and kissed the top of her head. "I think it's time we got you changed out of this party dress," she whispered. "We'll have cake again later, okay?" Ivy nodded again and climbed off the bed to pick out her pajamas. I turned and headed for the door. My hand hovered on the knob, my mind spinning. She was only 5, but she already knew too much about being let down. And this time, I wouldn't be one of the people to do it. The office was quiet, too quiet for the weight of the conversation I was about to start. I leaned forward slightly in the chair, elbows on my knees, fingers loosely clasped together. Across from me, Edward, my longtime lawyer, scanned through a few printed documents he'd pulled from his file. The floor-to-ceiling windows cast long shadows over the mahogany desk between us, the distant hum of the city muted through the thick glass. "I need to ask you something," I said finally, breaking the silence. Edward looked up, adjusting his glasses. "Go ahead." I paused, not because I was unsure of what I wanted, but because saying it aloud made it real, permanent. "I want full custody of Ivy," I said. His expression didn't shift, not much. Edward had the kind of face that had seen the worst of people in boardrooms and courtrooms alike, but even he couldn't hide the flicker of surprise that passed through his eyes. "You're sure?" "I'm past sure." My voice was calm but firm. "She needs stability, Edward. She needs peace. She needs to not have to flinch when her mother walks into a room." Edward folded his hands in front of him. "You know it's not going to be easy. The courts are reluctant to strip a mother of custody unless there's hard evidence: abuse, neglect, instability. You'd need to prove that Caroline is unfit." "She is unfit," I snapped, then immediately reeled it in, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Sorry, you weren't there." He let the silence hang a beat longer before responding. "Tell me what happened." So I did. I told him about Ivy's birthday, about how Caroline arrived uninvited and tried to play the loving mother in front of guests who didn't know better, about how Ivy physically recoiled when she reached out to touch her, about the comment Caroline made, the one that almost made me lose control. I told him about the look on my daughter's face, the fear, the confusion, the quiet request she made afterward that I never let her mother back into the house again, or she'd run away. "She's 5, I said finally. 5. No child should have to say something like that. Edward didn't write anything down. He just listened. "And Caroline," he asked, "what's her situation now? She comes and goes, says she wants a relationship with Ivy, but she's never around long enough to keep a promise. She drags in chaos every time she shows up, and then she disappears again. That's not parenting. That's trauma." Edward leaned back in his chair, crossing one ankle over his knee. "Legally, here's what you're looking at," he began. "Right now, you and Caroline have joint custody, though by default, and not because of any formal agreement, correct?" I nodded. "To get full legal custody, we'll need to either negotiate it, unlikely if she sees it as a power struggle, or file a motion to amend the existing custody arrangement. That means presenting evidence, testimonies, witnesses." "I can get that," I said. "The housekeeper, the nanny, hell, even me. They've seen it." He nodded. "That helps. But remember, the courts always start from the position that a child benefits from having both parents in their life. If Caroline challenges it, you'll need to show that being around her is actively harmful to Ivy." "She's not safe with her," I said. "Even if it's not physical, she messes with her head. She treats Ivy like an accessory." "I understand." He picked up a pen but didn't write anything yet. "We can move forward. I'll draft the paperwork to start the process. But I'll also be honest with you, Sebastian, Caroline is clever. She knows how to perform. And if this turns ugly, it'll get personal. She might bring up your past, your work hours, even your relationship with the nanny, as she claims." That last part made me pause. "What relationship?" Edward gave me a look. "You've started keeping her closer. People notice these things. It might be used to paint you as distracted, impulsive, or even, God forbid, inappropriate. You need to keep everything above board. No missteps." "I understand," I said tightly. "There's nothing between us. Elise is just—" I stopped. "She's good with Ivy. That's all." Edward gave a brief nod. Then we'll keep it that way. For now. He began to write then, his pen scratching softly against the paper. I stared past him out the window, watching the city below move in a rhythm that felt foreign. This wasn't the life I imagined when I first held Ivy in my arms 5 years ago, but this choice felt like the first right step I'd taken in a long time. Start the process, I said. I'll give you whatever you need. Edward looked up at me. You're ready for this fight. I didn't blink. I was born in one. The courtroom air was dry, sterile almost, but beneath it pulsed something raw, something permanent. The judge's voice had just echoed for the final time across the heavy chamber, full custody awarded to Mr. Sebastian Hale. Temporary restraining order to remain in effect. Further visitation will be reviewed in 6 months. It was over. At least the official part was. I turned and looked down at Ivy, her small hand tucked inside mine. She was clutching her stuffed bear with the other, the one I'd bought her on her birthday, the one that hadn't left her side since. Elise stood just behind her, silent, a calm anchor in the chaotic tide of bodies beginning to shift and rise. Caroline hadn't moved an inch since the gavel fell. Not until now. As the courtroom emptied, a storm broke loose behind me. You put a restraining order on me, she hissed, sharp enough to cut steel. I turned around just as the double doors flung open behind us. Caroline was storming toward us, heels clacking like gunshots across the marble floor. Her hair was immaculate, her makeup flawless like a war mask instead of grief. Sebastian, she snapped, voice rising as lawyers and court officials watched from the corners. You actually filed a restraining order against me. Caroline, I said lowly, stepping slightly in front of Ivy. Elise instinctively mirrored the move, gently guiding Ivy closer to her side. I'm her mother, she screamed. And that's exactly why I did it, I replied, steel tightening in my voice. To protect her, because you don't know what that word means. People had stopped moving now. Eyes darted. Security leaned forward from their posts at the door. Caroline's gaze cut toward Elise, venomous. You've always hated me. Don't think I don't see your game worming your way into his life, into my daughter's. Elise, I said without looking at her, take Ivy to the car. I'm not going anywhere, Caroline barked. You've already done enough damage today. I snapped sharper now. You showed up late unprepared and spewed lies under oath. You made this decision for us. Elise didn't hesitate. She knelt beside Ivy, whispering softly something I couldn't hear. Ivy glanced up at me. Daddy, it's okay, I said, brushing my hand over her hair. Go with Elise. Caroline tried to move forward, only for a court officer to step into her path. Ma'am, I need you to calm down, the officer said, firm but controlled. You're siding with him, she screeched, jabbing a finger in my direction. He's not the victim. He ruined everything. He abandoned me. He let her... Enough, I cut in. She froze at the tone. Stop pretending like you're not the architect of your own fallout, I said, voice even now. You didn't lose custody today, Caroline. You gave it away the moment you put yourself above your child. Again and again. You lied. You disappeared. And when you did show up, you didn't come for her. You came for control. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move. I wasn't falling for that anymore. And now, I added coldly, you don't get to stand here and play the victim. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time in a long time, Caroline Hale had no words. She didn't look like a mother. She looked like a stranger locked outside a life she never really tried to build. I turned away without another word, and walked toward the corridor. Outside, the air was sharper, clearer. Elise stood near the car, one hand on the door, the other resting lightly on Ivy's back. Ivy glanced over her shoulder and caught sight of me. She smiled. It was small, but real. I felt it anchor something inside me. Elise met my eyes as I approached. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer right away. The words felt too shallow. "She's not coming near her again," I said instead. Elise nodded. I turned to Ivy, crouched, and held out my arms. She ran into them without hesitation. I held her tightly, the echo of Caroline's screams fading behind me. This was the line, and I was never letting her cross it again. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in soft golden strips, falling across my half-packed suitcase. I sat cross-legged on the floor, folding a sweater into a neat square, pressing the weight of it down like I was trying to suppress the guilt building in my chest. It was my usual off day, a Sunday, a single day to step outside this house and breathe. But this time, it felt different, heavier. I reached for my shoes near the corner and placed them inside the bag. There was still part of me that wanted to stay, especially after everything with the party and the courtroom and Caroline's sudden return. But a bigger part of me reminded myself that I wasn't family. I was staff, the help. I wasn't supposed to linger too long. A gentle knock pulled me from my thoughts. Before I could answer, the door creaked open slightly, and there she was, Ivy. Her little bunny clutched tightly to her chest. A thin frown settled on her small face like it had always belonged there. "Elise." Her voice was quiet, cautious. I sat up straighter. "Hey, sweetheart, you're up early." She hesitated at the threshold before stepping in. Her bare feet barely made a sound on the wooden floor as she crossed the room. Her eyes flicked to my suitcase. "Are you leaving?" I swallowed and nodded. "Just for the day. I'll be back tomorrow morning." She stood there in silence, her expression unreadable. "Ivy." I started, unsure what to say. Her bottom lip trembled just a bit before she spoke again. "Can I come with you?" The question came out in a whisper, like she was afraid I'd laugh or say something cruel. My heart clenched instantly. "Oh, Ivy." I got to my knees and opened my arms. She walked right into them, burying her face into my neck. "I wish I could take you with me." "Why not?" she asked, muffled. "I don't want to stay here today." I paused. "Sweetheart, it's just for a day." "But it's a long day," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "and you're the only person I feel safe with." Her words landed hard, heavy, and cutting. I closed my eyes for a second, holding her tighter, letting the weight of her small body melt into mine. There was a time not long ago when this little girl wouldn't even let me touch her, and now she was begging to follow me out the door. "I'll talk to your dad," I said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "But just in case he says no, you have to be strong for me, all right?" She pulled back enough to look at me, her face creased with worry. "Will you come back? Always," I said, placing a kiss on her forehead. "Always, Ivy." I stepped into the hallway with my suitcase rolling behind me, the weight of my decision pressing gently against my chest. One foot down the stairs, and then, Elise. The desperate sound of my name came shrieking down the stairwell like thunder. My heart stopped. I turned just in time to see a small blur of flannel and hair flying down the staircase. Ivy, too late. She crashed into me at full speed, her arms flung around my waist, sobbing into my coat before I could even react. "Ivy!" I gasped, looking down, just as her arms flung around my waist and her face pressed into my stomach. She was crying. Real tears. Hot and angry and shaking sobs. "You didn't tell him," she cried. You said you would tell Daddy that I wanted to come with you. My heart stopped. Ivy, sweetheart, you promised Miss Elise. She wailed, clinging harder. You said you'd tell him. You said you would ask. Why didn't you ask? My voice cracked, helpless. Ivy, I didn't think. Let her go this minute, Ivy Hale. Annabelle's sharp voice cut through the chaos as she turned the corner in her robe, frowning deeply at the scene before her. What on earth is going on here? She's leaving. Ivy sobbed. And she didn't tell Daddy like she said. She was just going to go without me. Annabelle's eyes snapped to my suitcase, then narrowed on me. Elise, she said in a tone I hadn't heard from her before, not angry but confusion. What exactly are you doing? I didn't know what to say. The moment had spiraled so fast I couldn't gather my thoughts. I was only stepping out for my normal off day. I was going to come back? Why this big suitcase then? I'm returning some clothes to fill in new ones, I said. And you told this child she'd come with you, Annabelle asked, arms folding. I said I'd speak to Sebastian. Then why didn't you? Ivy sniffled, pulling back just enough to glare up at me with watery eyes. You said you'd talk to him. I waited. I kept waiting. But you never told him. Guilt twisted inside me, sharp and unforgiving. Ivy, I didn't mean to hurt you, I said, gently crouching down, brushing some hair from her wet cheeks. I thought maybe you'd change your mind. I didn't, she yelled. I wanted to go with you. Ivy, since when do you follow stranger out of the house? Annabelle asked. Stranger. Before I could respond, the stairs creaked again. Slow, heavy steps. What's going on? Sebastian's voice. I closed my eyes for a second before turning. He was standing there, shirt-sleeved, barefoot, a look of unease already forming on his face. His eyes swept over. Ivy, come here. Sebastian's voice was low but commanding, but Ivy didn't budge. Her arms stayed locked around my neck, her face buried in my shoulder. Her small body trembled like she was afraid that if she let go, I'd disappear. Again. Ivy, he repeated firmer this time. Still she didn't move. Sebastian sighed, and instead of calling again, he walked toward us. His eyes weren't hard but tired, guarded. He crouched beside us, his voice gentler now. Baby Elise leaves every Sunday. It's normal, okay, just for a day. She shook her head slowly. Silent tears trickled down her cheeks. What's so special about today, he asked softly. Why do you want to go with her all of a sudden? But Ivy gave no answer. Annabelle stepped forward with that familiar no-nonsense expression and reached toward her. Come now, young lady. This is no way to— Don't! Sebastian said sharply, holding up a hand to stop her. His eyes never left Ivy's face. Let her be. I looked down at Ivy and then back at him, heart racing. Can I take her with me? I asked, quiet but certain. Annabelle's head snapped to me so fast I thought I heard her neck crack. What? Sebastian turned to me, clearly caught off guard. His mouth opened slightly as if the idea hadn't occurred to him until I said it. I'll keep her safe, I said quickly. I promise. She just needs space, a change of environment. Just for a bit. Sebastian hesitated. I could see the internal war playing out behind his eyes. Trust versus fear. The father in him afraid to let her go. The man in him trying to believe in me. Elise, I don't think that's— She'll be safe. I cut in gently. With me. I'll call every hour if you want. I won't take her far. I'll protect her like she's mine. Annabelle scoffed from the side. Out of the question. Little Miss has never stepped foot outside these walls to travel, much less gone off to some stranger's house to stay the night. She's not a stranger, Sebastian said firmly, cutting her off. The weight of those words settled between us. Annabelle blinked, clearly stunned. I'll pack her things, I said softly. I'll drive you, Sebastian said, standing. If she's going, I want to see where she's staying. Ivy lifted her head at that, eyes red but wide. Really? Sebastian looked stunned for a beat, but then nodded. And just like that, Ivy unwrapped her arms from around my neck and threw herself into his. Her small arms circled his waist and her head rested against his chest. The way he looked down at her, holding her carefully, almost nervously, it broke something in me. He wasn't used to being loved like that. Not openly, not purely, not from her. He held her for a long second, then released her with a soft pat on the back. Go on, get your things. I'll help her, I said, already moving as Ivy dashed up the stairs in a flash of pink pajamas and wild curls. Annabelle stayed frozen in the hallway, eyes wide, mouth tight, clearly ready to protest again, but she didn't. Sebastian only watched after us, silent. And for the first time, it felt like he was letting go of something, fear, pride, or maybe the belief that he had to do it all alone. The car rolled to a stop in front of my small 2-bedroom townhouse, nestled on a quiet street lined with flowering dogwoods. I glanced at the familiar blue shutters and the chipped mailbox I always forgot to replace, but tonight it looked different somehow, like it was holding its breath. Sebastian stepped out first, opening the back door for Ivy, who clutched her stuffed bunny and slid out with her usual silence. She didn't run or skip. She just stood beside me and stared up at the house like she was trying to decide if it was safe to breathe. I stepped forward and unlocked the door. Sebastian didn't move. This is it, I said, turning back to him. It's not much, but it's home. He nodded, his hands in his coat pockets. It's quiet. I smiled faintly. That's kind of the point. Ivy stood between us, eyes darting up at her father and then to me. Is Daddy coming in? I looked at him, unsure. He hesitated too, but then he crouched down so he could meet her eyes. No, baby, not today. I just wanted to make sure you got here safe. Her face fell just slightly, that shadow of sadness she wore like armor flickering across her eyes. You'll come back, though? She asked. He nodded. Of course. First thing in the morning. Ivy threw her arms around his neck. He froze for half a second, always so unsure with affection, but then he returned the hug. When she pulled away, he stood and met my eyes. Call me if anything seems off. Anything. I will, I promised. We stood there for another second like neither of us really knew what to say. Then he gave a tight nod and turned back toward the car. Ivy watched him go quiet, her little hand curling into mine. When his taillights disappeared down the street, I opened the door. Come on, sweetheart. We stepped inside, and the moment the door clicked shut behind us, Ivy's hand gripped mine tighter. Is it okay if I sleep in your bed? Her voice was small, barely above a whisper. I knelt beside her. Of course it is. Do you want to look around first? She nodded, and I gave her the grandest tour I could, my tiny kitchen, the crooked bookshelf I kept meaning to fix, the pastel-colored guest room that belonged to Lara. When we got to my room, she climbed onto the bed without hesitation, tucking herself beneath the covers like she'd been here 1,000 times. I smiled and moved to get her some water, but her voice stopped me at the door. Will you sit with me until I fall asleep? I wouldn't dream of doing anything else, I whispered. I returned with a glass of water and climbed in beside her, not too close, not too far. We lay there in the dark, her breathing slowly, evening out. I listened to the wind tapping against the window, the silence of the house wrapping around us like a gentle embrace. After a long while, just before she slipped into sleep, she whispered, I like it here. My heart tightened. I'm glad, Ivy. Then just as her breath began to slow and deepen, she added, It smells like you. I blinked hard, biting back the sudden ache behind my eyes. "Sleep, little bird," I whispered. I waited until her tiny hand relaxed beside mine, and her chest rose and fell in that rhythm that only came with deep sleep. Then I slowly eased out of bed and padded quietly to the living room. I curled up on the couch phone, still in hand. My thumb hovered over Sebastian's number. I didn't call him. Instead, I stared out the window into the quiet street and tried not to think too much about the strange warmth blooming in the center of my chest. The morning passed in a blur of cartoons, scrambled eggs, and sleepy giggles. Ivy seemed lighter today. Still quiet, still careful, but she clung less tightly, moved a little more freely, and even hummed a little song under her breath as she helped me arrange slices of cucumber around the plate of sandwiches we were preparing for lunch. "Do you like triangles or squares?" I asked, crouching to her level with the bread knife in hand. She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Triangles are fancier." "Triangles it is," I said with a wink, and she smiled, an actual smile this time. Small, cautious, but real. We were halfway through the second plate when there was a knock at the door. Ivy froze instantly. I dried my hands quickly and gave her a reassuring look. "It's okay. I think I know who it is." I opened the door to find Lara standing there, arms full of shopping bags, and a chaotic grin stretched across her face. "Good Lord," I said, laughing as I stepped aside. "You look like who got a few lottery to pick out things." "I practically am. I figured you'd both need things. Also, I bought cookies, bubbles, glitter glue, and a totally age-inappropriate board game I will not let Ivy play, but that we might play after she's asleep." She dropped the bags at her feet and threw her arms around me, squeezing tight. "You okay?" she whispered into my shoulder. I nodded. "I think so. Yeah." When she pulled back, her eyes flicked to the hallway where Ivy lingered behind the door frame, peeking shyly. "And that must be the beautiful Ivy," Lara said, gently crouching slightly to wave. Ivy didn't speak, but she stepped forward slowly, and Lara offered her a soft smile, respectful and warm. "I brought a coloring book with sea creatures," she said, opening one of the bags and pulling it out like a magician unveiling a trick. Ivy's eyes lit up. "Octopuses." 3, Lara said with mock solemnity. "And a mermaid riding a dolphin." "Whoa," Ivy whispered. I smiled and stepped back as they began to chat, letting the two of them fall into an easy rhythm. Within minutes, the living room was littered with crayons and open pages, and the sandwich tray sat forgotten on the kitchen counter. "Lunch," I reminded as Lara drew a sea turtle with exaggerated eyelashes. "I'm drawing art," she said with mock offense. But we eventually migrated back to the table where Ivy sat between us, munching on triangle sandwiches and sipping apple juice while Lara told stories about her disastrous cooking adventures. "I once set an oven mitt on fire," Lara confessed with a dramatic gasp. "And then I screamed so loud the neighbor thought I'd been kidnapped." Ivy giggled. I swear it was possessed. It looked at me with rage in its cottony little eyes. We laughed and laughed, and for a moment, just one moment, everything felt normal. Like this me-Ivy Lara sunlight pouring through the kitchen window was the way it had always been. "Can we go to the park later?" Ivy asked suddenly. I blinked. It wasn't like her to initiate things, let alone ask for them. "I think we can arrange that," I said softly, brushing a crumb from her cheek. "Bring bubbles," she added, looking at Lara. "Are you kidding? I brought 4 kinds," Lara replied with pride. After lunch, we cleaned up together, music playing softly from the small Bluetooth speaker on the counter. Ivy danced around with her coloring book held above her head, declaring herself the queen of jellyfish. and Lara joined her, prancing in circles and making exaggerated dolphin noises that had Ivy in stitches. It wasn't long before the three of us collapsed on the couch, giggling and breathless. As I sat there with Ivy leaning against me and Lara pretending to be asleep with her arm dramatically draped over her forehead, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. This wasn't just relief, it was joy. Uncomplicated, surprising, solid joy. Ivy looked up at me, her voice sleepy now. "Do we have to go back?" My chest tightened. "Not today," I said. "Today is just for fun." Lara reached out, tickling Ivy's side. "And jellyfish queens get all the fun." The laughter resumed louder this time, and I let myself fall into it. Whatever storm waited outside this moment, Caroline the Court, the complicated future, would have to wait. The sun was low in the sky when we finally made it to the park, the clouds tinged in warm streaks of orange and lavender. Ivy bounced ahead of us, skipping with the careless delight of a child finally starting to shed some of her heaviness. She clutched her bubble wand like a sword, announcing that she was on a mission to fill the whole park with sparkles. Lara and I trailed behind, chatting about nothing in particular, until I noticed we'd drifted too far from the car. "Wait, did I lock it?" I murmured aloud, stopping. Lara blinked. "You ask that every time we park." "Because one time I didn't," I said, turning around. "I'll just check. I'll stay with Ivy," she offered casually. I jogged back across the grass and the narrow paved path, eyes scanning the lot for our car. I reached it, tested the handle, it was locked, and turned back toward the park. And that was when I heard it. A sharp yelp followed by a high-pitched, unmistakable cry. My heart dropped. My breath vanished. I bolted. "Ivy!" She was on the edge of the path by the low curb near the swings, crouched over and holding her knee, tears streaming down her face. Lara was already beside her, kneeling, hands out, like she wasn't sure what part of Ivy she could touch without making it worse. "She tripped," Lara said quickly. "It's okay, it's not bad." I dropped to my knees beside Ivy, already scanning her from head to toe. There was a nasty scrape on her knee, bloody red and raw, and dirt smudging her elbows and hands. But she was conscious, responsive, her breath hitching through sobs as she clutched my arm. "Oh my God, Ivy!" I breathed, brushing her hair back. "I'm here, baby. It's okay. You're okay." Her arms wrapped around my neck, and she buried her face into me, still crying. I should have held her hand. I should have watched her better. Annabelle is going to, Sebastian is going to... My voice caught in my throat, guilt rising like a tidal wave. "Elise." Lara's voice cut through my spiral, firm and grounding. "It's just a scrape. It looks worse than it is. But she's bleeding. It's surface level. She didn't even hit her head. We'll clean it. Bandage it. She's okay." Even Ivy, still sniffling, turned in my arms and whimpered, "I'm okay. I just didn't see the bump." "You're sure?" I asked Lara again, still panicked, still trembling. "I promise. I've had worse paper cuts," she said lightly. "Kids fall. She'll be fine." I nodded more to keep myself from crying than anything. I lifted Ivy gently, and she clung to me like a sleepy kitten. We went home quietly, Lara driving Ivy curled against me in the back seat, holding an ice pack we'd borrowed from a nearby food vendor wrapped in a cloth. By the time we reached the apartment, her tears had stopped completely. We got her cleaned up, disinfected the wound, and tucked her under a cozy blanket on the couch, a cartoon playing softly on the television. She looked up at me with droopy eyes. "Don't tell Daddy I fell," she murmured. "He'll be sad." I tried to smile. "Daddy would want to know, but don't worry. I'll tell him it's not serious." That night, after she was tucked into bed and snoring gently, I found myself staring at my phone for a full minute before I finally dialed Sebastian. He answered on the second ring. "Elise." "Hey," I said, trying to sound light. "How are you?" "Fine. Just going through reports. Is Ivy okay?" I hesitated. "Elise," he asked again, voice tightening. "She's okay now. She tripped at the park." Silence. "She fell," he said, voice sharp. "She just scraped her knee," I rushed to add. "It looked bad at first, but Lara cleaned it up and it's already better. She's asleep." Why didn't you call me immediately?" "Because it wasn't serious," I said. "If it was, I would have driven straight to the hospital and called you on the way." "She cried, didn't she?" "Yes," I admitted, closing my eyes. "But she was more scared than hurt. Sebastian, she asked me not to tell you. She didn't want you to worry." He was quiet again. Then I heard the faint creak of a chair and knew he'd stood up. "I'm coming over." "No, you don't need to," I said quickly. "She's already asleep. Please, I wouldn't lie to you about something like this. You should have still told me the second it happened." "I know. I'm sorry," I whispered. I panicked too. Another pause. His voice softened, but just barely. I wasn't there, and I hate that." "I know." More silence. "All right," he finally said. "But tomorrow I want to see the injury myself." "Of course." "Elise." "Yeah. Thank you for taking care of her." I froze. He'd never said it quite like that before. I'd do it again 1,000 times. I said a little quieter. "Good night." "Good night." I hung up, set the phone on the nightstand, and looked in on Ivy one more time. She was still asleep, the soft glow of her nightlight casting a golden halo around her blanket-covered form. I exhaled slowly. Tomorrow would come. The worry, the court, Caroline, the weight of the world. But tonight we were okay, and that was enough. The morning sun filtered through the curtains in soft golden waves as the smell of buttered toast filled the kitchen. Ivy sat across from me at the table, swinging her legs and poking at her scrambled eggs with her fork. Lara was at the stove, humming off-key to a song I didn't recognize as she flipped pancakes, her hair twisted into a messy bun that somehow made her look more awake than I felt. "I want a smiley face on mine," Ivy declared, resting her chin in her hands. "You'll get 2, Lara said without missing a beat. I couldn't stop watching Ivy not after last night. The scrape on her knee was still pink and puffy, but she hadn't limped at all this morning. She'd even giggled when I added extra whipped cream to her hot chocolate. The silence of the moment was broken by a firm knock on the door. I blinked. "Expecting someone?" Lara shook her head, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Maybe the neighbor." She walked toward the door and I followed her with my eyes, my heart doing a strange little hop in my chest, a familiar, ridiculous hop. She pulled the door open and froze. Then she turned back to me with wide eyes. Elise, it's your boss." I froze with my coffee halfway to my lips. "Sebastian." Ivy perked up instantly. "Daddy!" Before I could answer, Ivy had already shot off her chair and bolted for the door. I stood up just as Sebastian stepped into view in the doorway, still dressed sharp dark slacks, open collar shirt sleeves slightly rolled. His eyes landed on me for the briefest second before Ivy crashed into him, arms wrapping tightly around his waist. He caught her easily and crouched down. "Hey, baby girl," he said softly, brushing a curl from her face. "How's the knee?" Ivy blinked. "How did you know?" He gave her a faint smile. "Elise told me." Ivy pouted a little, glancing over her shoulder at me. "You promised not to." "I told him it wasn't serious," I said, gently crossing the room. "He needed to know." Sebastian inspected her knee with quiet intensity, his brows tightening before he exhaled and nodded. "It's not bad. You were very brave." "I didn't even cry that much," she said with an air of pride. He chuckled, standing again, then his gaze moved to Lara. "I didn't get the chance to thank you properly," he said, "for helping with the party. Everything you did, it meant a lot. To Ivy and to me." Lara waved it off but smiled. "No thanks needed. Ivy's amazing. I'd do it again." Ivy beamed clearly, soaking in every bit of the attention. "I just came to check in before we head back," Sebastian added, shifting his weight slightly. "Are you both ready?" I hesitated. "Yeah, almost. We'll grab our things." He nodded and glanced around the room like he hadn't seen this side of life in a while. Toast crumbs, half-full mugs, the messiness of people living without protocol. Ivy tugged on his hand. "Can I ride in your car this time?" "We'll see," he said, rubbing the top of her head with a look that was somewhere between fond and uncertain. As Lara helped Ivy into her shoes and gathered her things, I lingered by the counter, feeling the strange weight of Sebastian's presence in this space that had started to feel like mine. He walked closer, his voice low. "She's okay. She's perfect," I said. "She's strong." He glanced at me, then away. "I don't know what I would have done but she's fine," I reminded him. A beat of silence passed between us before he gave a small nod. "Thank you, Elise. You don't have to keep saying that." "I know," he said, "but I want to." The car was comfortably warm, the soft hum of the engine blending with Ivy's excited chatter as she leaned forward from the backseat seatbelt snug across her chest, curls bouncing with every turn of her head. And then Lara said I was the fastest, even faster than the boy with the red shoes. "Did you see me run? Daddy Elise said she thought I had wings." Ivy's voice was lit with pride, and her hands moved in animated gestures. Sebastian gave a quiet chuckle, one hand steady on the wheel. "You did look like you were flying." "I wasn't even tired," she continued. "And then I ate 2 slices of pizza. Lara said I'm going to grow tall because of it." "That's how it works," I said, smiling at her through the rearview mirror. She grinned back, then tilted her head. "Elise." "Yes, honey. Are you married?" The question landed like a soft pebble tossed into still water, but the ripple it sent through me was immediate. My gaze slid to Sebastian at the same time his shifted slightly toward me. There was a brief pause in the hum of conversation. Just the road beneath us and the quiet music playing on the radio. "No," I said softly, keeping my eyes on the mirror. "I'm not married." "Oh," Ivy said, frowning in the thoughtful way she often did when processing things. "Okay." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but it held something unspoken. Sebastian didn't say anything, but I could feel the weight of his glance brushing against me before he looked away again, his expression unreadable as the city drifted past our windows, and I sat there between a question too innocent and a silence too heavy.